It was a quiet evening in the city. The golden lights of the restaurant glowed like a jewel in the middle of the busy street. Expensive cars stopped outside one by one. Well-dressed men and women walked in with confidence, their clothes shining, their jewelry catching the light. The smell of fresh bread and roasted meat floated into the air. This was not just any restaurant. It was known as one of the most exclusive places in town. Only the rich, the powerful, and the famous came here. People came not only for the food, but also to show their wealth at the big glass doors. A young waiter stood with a fake smile on his face. He was used to greeting important guests. He would open the door quickly, bow a little, and say in his polite voice, "Good evening, welcome." But behind his smile, he often judged people. He believed only those who looked rich deserved respect. That night, something unexpected happened. The doors slowly opened, and in walked an elderly black couple. The man was tall, but thin, his back a little bent from age. His wife walked beside him, holding his arm gently. Their clothes were plain, old-fashioned, and worn out. The man wore a faded jacket, the woman a simple dress. Their shoes looked old, almost too old for such a shining place. The restaurant grew silent for a moment. People at the table stopped their conversations. A few women raised their eyebrows. Some men smirked and looked away, whispering. Everyone thought the same thing. What are they doing here? The waiter at the door froze. His eyes quickly looked at their clothes, then at their hands. No jewelry, no expensive watch, no shiny purse. Nothing that proved wealth. To him, they looked poor. And then instead of greeting them politely, he let out a small laugh. It was not a kind laugh. It was the kind of laugh that says, "You don't belong here." The couple noticed, but they did not react. The old man simply nodded and led his wife toward an empty table. His steps were slow but steady. He carried himself with quiet dignity. The woman walked with grace, though her dress was simple. As they moved, the waiter smirked again. He thought to himself, why would they come here? They can't afford even a glass of water. He walked after them and spoke loudly enough for other diners to hear. "Excuse me, sir, ma'am," he said with sarcasm. "This is a very expensive restaurant. Are you sure you're in the right place?" Some people nearby laughed quietly. A young couple at the next table whispered, "They must be lost." Another diner shook his head and said, "Ridiculous. They should try a cheap diner down the road." But the elderly couple did not argue. They did not raise their voices. The old man simply looked at his wife, smiled softly, and said, "Please, let us sit." The waiter rolled his eyes but stepped aside. He thought this was going to be fun, a chance to mock someone. The couple sat at the table nearest to the kitchen, far away from the large windows where the rich usually liked to be seen. The waiter had chosen this spot on purpose. He wanted them hidden, away from the glamorous crowd. As they settled in, the silence in the restaurant turned into whispers. The sound of forks and glasses returned, but now conversations were filled with gossip. Why are they here? They look so poor. Maybe they walked in by mistake. Wait until the bill comes. They'll run away. The old man opened the menu, his hands slightly trembling with age. The woman looked at him kindly, her eyes filled with patience. They were not embarrassed. They were not angry. They seemed almost calmed. The waiter, however, was not finished. He leaned toward them and asked, "Would you like some water? Or should I show you a cheaper menu? We don't really serve budget meals here." This time, some people laughed out loud. A group of businessmen at a nearby table clapped their hands in mock applause. The waiter grinned, thinking he had made a joke. But the old man only raised his eyes and said politely, "You will order soon, thank you." His voice was soft, but there was something strong in it. Something that made a few people pause. The waiter, still smirking, walked away. He thought he was in control. He thought he had already embarrassed them. But little did he know, the night was about to change. As the couple sat there quietly, a strange tension filled the room. Some guests were entertained by the scene, but a few others began to feel uneasy. One young boy sitting with his parents kept looking at the couple. His innocent eyes did not understand why people were laughing. He whispered to his mother, Why is everyone being mean to them? His mother did not answer. She lowered her eyes, ashamed. The old woman noticed the boy and gave him a gentle smile. Her smile was warm, kind, the type that carried years of wisdom and struggle. For a second, the boy smiled back. The atmosphere grew heavier. People waited, curious to see what would happen next. Would the couple be thrown out? Would they argue? Or would they simply leave in shame? But the couple stayed. They sat tall, their faces calm, as if they belonged there more than anyone else. The waiter from a distance shook his head and whispered to another staff member, "They won't last here. Watch and see." What he didn't know was that soon, he himself would be the one trembling, because the truth about this elderly couple was something no one in that restaurant could imagine. And when it came out, the laughter would stop. The restaurant would fall into complete silence. The restaurant buzzed with quiet conversations again, but the air was not the same. Everyone kept glancing at the elderly black couple who now sat silently at their table. The old man looked at the menu with steady eyes. His wife sat beside him, her hands folded gently on the table. They didn't seem bothered by the stares, the whispers, or the waiter's smirk. But the tension in the room kept growing. The waiter standing near the counter kept watching them. He shook his head with disbelief. "What a joke," he muttered to another waiter. "They think they can eat here. They probably don't even have money for tea." His colleague frowned. "Stop it," he whispered back. "Don't make trouble." But the young waiter only laughed louder. He enjoyed being the center of attention. He thought mocking others made him clever. With a fake smile plastered on his face, he returned to the couple's table. He leaned close, pretending to act professional, but his eyes were filled with arrogance. "So have you decided?" he asked. His voice carried a sharp edge. "Or should I recommend something affordable?" The words cut through the air. A few people nearby chuckled, covering their mouths. Others leaned closer, waiting for the couple's reaction. The elderly man looked up slowly. His calm eyes met the waiter's mocking gaze. For a brief moment, it felt as if time had stopped. Then, with a soft voice, he said, "We would like the house special, please." The waiter blinked. He didn't expect that. The house special was the most expensive dish on the menu. "Are you?" "Sure," the waiter asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "It costs more than a week's pay for some people. Wouldn't you prefer? Maybe soup and bread." A ripple of laughter passed through the restaurant. Some guests shook their heads, entertained by the scene. A man whispered to his wife, "This is going to be good. Let's see how they explain when they can't pay." But the old man remained steady. He repeated, "The house special." "And 2 glasses of water?" The woman at his side nodded gently, her face serene. The waiter straightened up, his smirk growing wider. He wanted everyone to hear what he said next. "Of course," he replied loudly. "The house special. For our special guests." He let out a laugh, short and cruel. The laugh echoed. A few people joined in. Not because they found it funny, but because cruelty often draws weak laughter from the crowd. The old woman lowered her eyes, but not out of shame. It was patience. She placed her hand lightly on her husband's arm, as if to say, "Stay calm. Don't let them win." The man nodded. His silence was powerful, stronger than any angry words could have been, but the waiter didn't understand. He thought silence meant weakness. He believed he had humiliated them. When he walked away, still laughing under his breath, the couple sat quietly. They didn't whisper, they didn't argue. They just waited. Across the room, a young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve. He had seen the whole scene. "Mom," he whispered, "why did he laugh at them? They didn't do anything wrong." The mother looked uncomfortable. She placed a finger on her lips and whispered back, "Just eat your food." But her eyes betrayed her guilt. She knew the waiter was wrong. The boy frowned, staring at the couple. Something about them felt different. They didn't look broken. They looked strong, even though they wore old clothes. Meanwhile, the waiter returned to the counter where other staff were standing. He told them what had happened. exaggerating his words. "They ordered the most expensive dish," he said, laughing. "Can you believe that? Let's see how they pay. Maybe with old coins or with nothing at all?" Some waiters laughed with him, though uneasily. Others stayed quiet, uncomfortable. At one table near the window, a businessman shook his head. "This is embarrassing," he muttered. "Why doesn't management stop this? They don't belong here." But his wife whispered back, "Look at their faces. They're not afraid. Doesn't that strike you as strange?" The businessman looked again. She was right. The couple didn't look nervous. They didn't fidget. They didn't glance at the door as if planning to escape the bill. They sat with dignity, their backs straight, their eyes calm. It was as if they had nothing to prove. Minutes passed. The smell of food filled the air. Plates clattered in the kitchen. Glasses sparkled under the lights. Yet the energy in the restaurant stayed tense. Everyone was waiting for the next moment. Finally, the waiter returned to the couple's table, holding their drinks. He set the glasses of water down with a little too much force, making one glass shake dangerously. "Here you go," he said with a fake smile. "The finest water in the city. Please, drink slowly. We wouldn't want you to spill it. It might be too expensive." Another cruel laugh. This time, the restaurant grew quieter. The laughter that followed was thinner. Some people looked at the waiter with disapproval. Others began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. The old woman finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but clear enough for people nearby to hear. "Young man," she said gently, "be careful how you treat people. Life has a way of teaching lessons." Her words were not angry. They were calm, almost kind, but they struck the waiter like a slap. His smile faltered for a second before returning. "Oh, don't worry about me," he replied with arrogance. "I'm doing just fine. Maybe you should worry about your bill instead." And again, he laughed. But this time, nobody joined him. The room felt heavier. Guests looked away, embarrassed for him. The sound of his laugh echoed awkwardly, dying quickly in the air. The couple sipped their water in silence, unfazed. Something was happening in that restaurant. Something invisible but powerful. The waiter thought he was in control, but in truth, the more he laughed, the more respect the couple gained. Their silence, their patience, their comment was beginning to turn the crowd's opinion. Even the manager, watching from the far corner, felt uneasy. He knew something the waiter did not. He had recognized the couple the moment they walked in, and soon the truth would come out. But for now, the waiter laughed again, trying to cover his nervousness. He thought he was still winning. What he didn't realize was this. Every laugh was leading him closer to his greatest regret, because the whole restaurant was about to go silent. The restaurant glowed with warm golden light, but the air inside was colder than ever. People were still whispering, still stealing glances at the elderly black couple who sat quietly near the kitchen. Their table was small, their chairs plain, far away from the shining windows and the glamorous crowd. The waiter, full of pride, thought he had already humiliated them. He believed his laughter had crushed their dignity. But the couple sat with calm faces, showing no anger, no shame. Their silence unsettled some of the guests. The waiter, however, took their calmness as weakness. He wanted more. He wanted to break them. He leaned against the counter, folding his arms, his smirk never leaving his face. "Just watch," he told another waiter. "They'll embarrass themselves soon. They won't even know how to use a fork here." His colleague frowned. "Enough," he said quietly. "They're just old people. Leave them alone." But the arrogant waiter only chuckled. "No," he whispered. "This is entertainment." With that, he grabbed a notepad and walked back to their table. His steps were slow, exaggerated, like a performer stepping onto a stage. He wanted everyone's eyes on him. And indeed, many guests leaned closer, pretending to sip their drinks, pretending to look at their menus, but really watching him. The waiter stopped by the table, his tone dripping with fake politeness. "So," he said, tapping his pen against the notepad, "you've ordered the house special? A brave choice. But may I recommend something else?" The old man looked up calmly. "No, thank you. We will have the special." The waiter tilted his head. pretending to be thoughtful. Perhaps soup instead, or maybe bread and butter. Much easier for the stomach and for the wallet. A ripple of quiet laughter spread through the restaurant again. Some guests covered their mouths. Others shook their heads. But the elderly woman raised her eyes to the waiter and said softly, "We know what we want." Her calmness made the waiter uncomfortable, but he quickly covered it with another smirk. "As you wish," he said loudly. "But don't say I didn't warn you. The bill might shock you." This time fewer people laughed. The cruelty was becoming too obvious. Still, the waiter wasn't satisfied. He wanted to push further. When he walked away, he spoke loudly enough for the whole room to hear. "They'll probably split one plate between them. That's what happens when you order something you can't afford." This time, the laughter was sharper, crueler. The couple sat in silence, their faces calm, but their silence carried a weight. It was not weakness, it was strength. But most people in the room couldn't see it yet. The young boy from earlier, sitting with his parents, tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad," he whispered, "why is he being so mean?" "They didn't do anything wrong." His father shifted uncomfortably. "Eat your food, son." But the boy shook his head. "I don't like it." His innocent eyes stayed fixed on the couple, and his small hands clenched into fists under the table. Back at the kitchen counter, the waiter told his colleagues another joke. "Maybe they'll pay in coins," he laughed. "Or maybe with a story." Poor people always have stories. Even some of the staff looked away, ashamed. One of the older waiters muttered, "You're going too far." But the young waiter didn't care. He felt powerful. He believed everyone was on his side. Minutes later, he returned to the couple's table with a tray of bread rolls. Instead of placing them gently, he dropped them on the table with a thud. One roll bounced and almost fell to the floor. "Here," he said loudly. "Something to keep you full before your royal meal arrives." His voice was dripping with sarcasm. Some people chuckled, but others sighed. The atmosphere was beginning to change. Cruelty that once seemed funny was starting to feel ugly. The old man looked at the bread calmly, then back at the waiter. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't scold him. He simply said, "Thank you." Those two simple words carried more dignity than the waiter's entire performance. For the first time, the waiter's smirk faltered. He quickly turned away, but deep inside, he felt a flicker of unease. Why didn't they break? Why didn't they argue? He returned to the counter, trying to laugh it off. "They actually thanked me," he said, rolling his eyes. Unbelievable. But the manager, who had been watching from across the room, stepped forward this time. His face was serious, his eyes sharp. He spoke quietly to the waiter. "Enough," he said firmly. "Serve them with respect." The waiter blinked, surprised. "Respect? For them?" He whispered. "Yes," the manager said. "For them?" But the waiter didn't understand. He only saw two elderly people in old clothes. To him, they were nobodies. He couldn't imagine why the manager looked so tense. The waiter shrugged off the warning and went back to polishing glasses. But his eyes never left the couple. Meanwhile, whispers spread around the room. Some diners began to argue softly. "This is wrong," one woman whispered. "They shouldn't even be here," another man replied. "But look at them," the woman said. "They're not afraid." Doesn't that mean something? The suspense in the room thickened. Everyone was waiting. Waiting to see what would happen when the food arrived. Waiting to see how the couple would pay. Waiting for the moment when everything would be revealed. The couple, however, remained calm. They shared a quiet conversation, their voices low and steady, as if they were in their own world. The old woman leaned closer to her husband and whispered patience. "The truth will come soon." He nodded. "Yes, let them laugh. Their laughter won't last long." Their words were soft, but their meaning was strong, and in that moment, if anyone had been close enough to hear, they would have felt the power hidden in their silence. But for now, the waiter was still blind to it. He believed he was in control, and so he prepared for his next act of mockery, an act that would soon turn against him because the night was not going to end the way he thought. The old couple was not who he believed, and soon the entire restaurant would know the truth. The soft music inside the restaurant played on, but the atmosphere was heavy. People were no longer fully focused on their meals. Their eyes often drifted toward the corner table near the kitchen, toward the elderly black couple who sat quietly, enduring the waiter's arrogance. The waiter, full of false confidence, believed he had humiliated them enough. He had laughed, mocked, and thrown sharp words at them. But to his surprise, the couple did not break. They did not fight back. Their silence was not weakness. It was something else, something stronger. Yet the waiter couldn't see it. When the kitchen bell rang, signaling the order was ready, the waiter grabbed the tray. On it lay the restaurant's most expensive dish, the house special. Served on a silver plate, decorated with fine sauces, the smell rich and mouth-watering. It was the kind of meal only the wealthy usually dared to order. The waiter carried the tray with exaggerated steps, making sure the entire room noticed. He wanted the attention. He wanted the crowd to watch him deliver the dish to the couple. In his mind, this was the perfect stage. He set the plate down in front of them, his smile thin and mocking. "Well," he said loudly, "here it is. The house special. One of the finest meals in the city. Please, enjoy it. But remember, it's not free." A few people chuckled again. Others whispered. Some shook their heads, uncomfortable with how far this was going. The old man looked at the dish, then at the waiter. His face showed no anger, no fear. Only calm. "Thank you," he said softly. The woman beside him nodded with grace. She adjusted her napkin gently on her lap, as if she were in her own home, unbothered by the stares. The waiter tilted his head. Their politeness annoyed him. Why didn't they defend themselves? Why didn't they show weakness? He wanted a reaction, but their calmness was like a shield. As the couple began to eat slowly, the waiter leaned closer and whispered, just loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, "Do you know how much this costs? It's more than most people make in a week. Are you sure you can handle the bill?" The old man calmly cut a piece of food and placed it in his mouth. He chewed slowly, swallowed, then looked up. His eyes met the waiter's, steady and sharp. "Yes," he said firmly. "We can handle it." Those simple words carried a power that made the waiter blink. He stepped back slightly, though he quickly covered his unease with another smirk. Still, the people around heard the exchange. Their curiosity grew. "How will they pay?" one man whispered. "They must be crazy," another said. "Or maybe," someone else murmured, "maybe they know something we don't." The whispers spread like fire. The entire restaurant was now waiting, not just for the meal to finish, but for the truth that hung in the air like a storm. The young boy, sitting with his parents, leaned forward eagerly. He had been watching every move, every word. He whispered to his mother, "They're not scared at all. They look different. Like they know something." His mother didn't answer. She only stared at the couple, uneasy. For the first time, she wondered if maybe the boy was right. Back at the kitchen, the other waiters watched too. One of them, older and wiser, shook his head. "He's going to regret this," he muttered. "Mark my words. That couple isn't ordinary." But the arrogant waiter ignored everyone. He still thought he was in control. When the couple finished a few bites, the waiter returned again, this time holding a notepad. He tapped it with his pen, speaking loudly. "Now," he said, "should I prepare the bill? Or do you need more time too? Figure out how you'll pay." Gasps and whispers filled the room again. Some people leaned closer, hungry for drama. Others looked away, ashamed of what was happening. The old woman finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but clear. "Young man," she said gently, "do not judge people so quickly. You never know who you are serving." Her words struck something deep in the room. The whispering stopped for a moment. Even the music seemed quieter. The waiter's smirk wavered again, but he forced a laugh. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm serving," he said boldly. To poor old people who walked into the wrong place, the crowd reacted differently this time. Some shook their heads. A woman whispered, "That's too much." A man muttered, "He'll regret that one day." The couple remained calm. They picked up their glasses of water and sipped slowly, their dignity untouched. Finally, the old man placed his fork down. He looked directly at the waiter and spoke in a steady voice. "We will finish our meal," he said. "Then, when the time is right, you will know who we are." The waiter laughed loudly, but it sounded forced. His laugh echoed across the restaurant, but no one joined him. Not this time. The diners sat in silence, watching, waiting. The old man's words had planted a seed of suspense in every heart. The waiter walked away, trying to convince himself he was still in charge. But deep down, something bothered him. Their calmness, their confidence, their quiet power, it was like nothing he had ever seen. The manager, watching from a distance, clenched his jaw. He already knew the truth. He had recognized the couple from the moment they entered, and he knew the waiter's arrogance was leading to disaster. But the couple had asked for patience. And so the manager waited too. The restaurant returned to its rhythm: forks clinking, glasses touching, quiet conversations. But beneath the surface, everyone was tense. Every guest, every staff member, even the waiter himself, they were all waiting for the moment when the truth would be revealed, and when it came, it would silence them all. The restaurant was alive with the sound of cutlery and quiet chatter. But beneath that hum, something heavier lingered. Every eye drifted, sooner or later, toward the small table near the kitchen, where the elderly black couple sat. The old man and woman looked calm, almost serene, as if they had not noticed the stares, the whispers, the cruel laugh of the waiter. But everyone else had noticed. The tension in the room was thick, like a storm waiting to break. The waiter, however, refused to see it. He still believed he was in control. He still believed he had embarrassed the couple beyond repair. With his head held high, he walked between tables, grinning at those who gave him approving looks, ignoring those who shook their heads. But his arrogance was about to meet resistance. Back in the kitchen, one of the senior waiters, a man in his late 50s with gray hair and tired eyes, leaned against the counter. He had worked in the restaurant for years, long enough to know when trouble was brewing. He had been watching the scene unfold from the start, and his stomach churned with unease. Finally, he pulled the arrogant waiter aside. "Listen to me," he said in a low voice, his tone firm. "You need to stop." The younger waiter rolled his eyes. "Stop what?" "I'm just doing my job, no," the older man said, shaking his head. "You're not doing your job. You're mocking them. You're humiliating them. And you have no idea who they are." The young waiter froze for a moment. Then he burst out laughing. "Who they are? They're just two poor old people in rags. Look at them. They don't belong here." The older waiter leaned closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I said you have no idea who they are. And if I were you, I would treat them with respect before it's too late." For a second, the young waiter's smirk faltered. He glanced toward the couple, then back at his colleague. "What do you mean?" he asked cautiously. But the older man only shook his head. "You'll see. Just remember my words, respect them." The younger waiter tried to laugh it off, but the warning echoed in his mind. "Respect them. Respect them." Why would his colleague say that? He shook his head, muttering nonsense, and walked away. But deep inside, a flicker of unease stirred. Out in the dining area, the couple continued their meal slowly, with quiet dignity. The old man cut his food with careful precision, while the woman occasionally sipped her water. Their silence was powerful, and some guests were beginning to notice. A woman at a nearby table leaned toward her husband. "Look at them," she whispered. "They don't look nervous at all. Doesn't that seem strange?" Her husband frowned. "Strange or not, they don't belong here. You saw their clothes, but their eyes," the woman said softly. "They don't look like the eyes of poor people. They look wise." The husband had no reply. He only shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Across the room, the young boy from earlier kept staring at the couple. His plate of food sat half-eaten, forgotten. He tugged on his father's arm. "Dad," he whispered, "the waiter is wrong. They're not poor. I can feel it." His father sighed. "Eat your dinner." But the boy shook his head. His eyes never left the couple. Meanwhile, the waiter, still annoyed by his colleague's warning, decided to push harder. He walked to the couple's table once again, his smile sharp and false. "How is everything?" he asked loudly. "Delicious, I hope. After all, you're eating one of the most expensive meals we have. It would be such a shame if you couldn't finish it, or couldn't pay for it." The room stirred again. Whispers rose like a low wind. Some guests chuckled nervously, others frowned. The old man placed his fork down carefully. He looked up at the waiter with steady eyes. "You seem very concerned about us," he said softly. "Why?" The question caught the waiter off guard. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He laughed nervously and replied, "I just don't want you to be embarrassed later." The old woman finally spoke. Her voice was calm, but there was strength in it. "Young man," she said gently, "be careful with your words. A day will come when you wish you had spoken differently." Her words sent a chill through the room. They were not angry, but they carried weight. The waiter's smile trembled for a moment. He quickly forced a laugh and walked away, but the warning echoed in his mind. "Be careful with your words." Back at the counter, the older waiter watched silently, shaking his head. He knew the younger man's pride would not let him listen. The manager, too, stood in the corner, his face tight. He had recognized the couple long ago, but he kept his distance, waiting. He knew the truth could not stay hidden forever. The diners continued to eat, but the mood had shifted. The laughter that once followed the arrogant waiter was fading. The cruel jokes no longer sounded funny. More and more, the crowd's sympathy began to lean toward the couple, and still, the elderly man and woman sat quietly, eating with grace, their patience unshaken. The young waiter thought he was winning, but with every cruel word, every mocking smile, every laugh, he was walking closer to his downfall, because the truth about the couple was already in the room. It was in the eyes of the manager. It was in the whispers of the senior waiter. It was hidden in the calm silence of the couple themselves, and soon, that truth would come crashing down. For now, though, the warning had been given and ignored. The restaurant glowed with warm lights, and the faint notes of piano music floated in the air. But the guests weren't paying much attention to the decor or the music anymore. Their focus was on the corner table, the elderly black couple who sat with quiet dignity, eating their meal under the watchful eyes of everyone around them. The arrogant waiter still wore his smug smile as he paced across the room. He had ignored the warnings. He had ignored the whispers of disapproval. In his mind, he was the star of this night, entertaining the crowd with his cruel jokes at the couple's expense. But the crowd was beginning to change at first. Some guests had laughed along with him. They had smirked at the couple's plain clothes, whispered about how they didn't belong, and nodded when the waiter mocked them. But as the minutes passed, something shifted. The couple's silence was unsettling. Their calmness was powerful. It was as though they knew something no one else did. And the more they endured without complaint, the more guilty some people began to feel. A man at one table muttered under his breath, "Should stop now." His wife nodded quickly. "This has gone too far. Look at them, they're not doing anything wrong. Why is he treating them this way?" At another table, a group of young adults whispered fiercely. One of them leaned forward. "It's not funny anymore. He looks like a fool, not them." But not everyone agreed. Some still clung to their prejudice, shaking their heads. A businessman in a suit leaned toward his companion and sneered. "They shouldn't be here. This place is for people like us." Yet even he sounded less confident than before. His words lacked weight. His companion only frowned and stayed silent. Meanwhile, the young boy from earlier couldn't hold his feelings back anymore. He looked at his mother with wide eyes. "Mom," he whispered, "why is everyone being so mean to them? They're just eating. Why does it matter what they wear?" His mother looked uncomfortable. She didn't have an answer. The father, however, scolded the boy sharply. "Enough. Eat your food." But the boy shook his head. "No, it's wrong." The mother touched her son's arm gently, as if to calm him. But deep inside, she agreed with him, back near the kitchen. The senior waiter, who had tried to warn his younger colleague, watched silently. He could see the shift happening. The crowd was no longer fully on the young waiter's side. Every cruel word he spoke was losing its effect. The more he tried to humiliate the couple, the more he exposed his own arrogance. The older waiter sighed. He doesn't realize he's digging his own grave, he muttered under his breath at the couple's table. The old man placed his fork down for a moment. He could feel the eyes on him, the whispers circling the room. Slowly, he turned his head, scanning the faces of the diners. His gaze was calm but piercing, as if he could see into their hearts. For a brief second, every person who met his eyes felt something unexpected shame. It was as if he was silently asking them, "Why do you stay quiet when wrong is happening before you?" The woman beside him took a gentle sip of water. Her hands were steady. She spoke softly, but her voice carried across the table. People reveal who they are when they think no one is watching. But the truth always comes out. Her words weren't aimed at anyone in particular, but they rippled through the air like a warning. A few guests looked down at their plates, unable to meet her calm, knowing eyes. The waiter, annoyed by their dignity, walked back toward them with his forced smile. "Are we enjoying our meal?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Or is it too rich for you?" But this time, no one laughed. The silence that followed was heavy. A man at the far end of the restaurant cleared his throat loudly. "Enough," he muttered. Not loud enough to confront, but loud enough to be heard. The waiter froze. He glanced at the man, then at the rest of the diners. Many were watching him with disapproval now, their faces stern. The support he once felt in the crowd was slipping away. The young boy suddenly spoke up, his voice cutting through the quiet room. "Stop being mean to them," he shouted. Gasps echoed. The boy's parents tried to hush him, but it was too late. Every guest had heard his words. The waiter's face turned red. He forced a laugh, trying to brush it off. "Out of the mouths of children, eh?" he said mockingly. But his voice trembled slightly. The boy glared at him. "You're the rude one, not them." Whispers filled the room again, but they sounded different now. They were not whispers of mockery. They were whispers of doubt, guilt, and even admiration for the child's courage. The old man smiled faintly at the boy. A warm, grateful smile that spoke without words. "Thank you," the waiter, desperate to regain control, snapped, "Mind your own business." Kid, but that was the breaking point. A woman near the front stood up sharply. "That's enough," she said loudly. "This isn't entertainment. You're supposed to serve people, not insult them." Her words rang through the restaurant like a bell. Heads turned and several others nodded in agreement. Another man spoke firmly. "She's right. You've crossed the line." One by one, voices joined in. The whispers had turned into open defiance. The crowd was no longer silent. The waiter's confidence crumbled, his face flushed with embarrassment. He looked around desperately, but the smiles he had counted on were gone. All he saw now were frowns, shaking heads, and eyes filled with judgment. The couple, however, remained calm. They continued their meal slowly, as if the chaos around them did not exist. Their patience was unshaken, their dignity untouchable. The manager stepped forward slightly, his hands clasped behind his back. He still waited, letting the scene unfold. Knowing the moment of truth was close, the senior waiter leaned against the counter, whispering, "It's happening. The crowd is turning. He's finished." Indeed, the arrogant waiter had lost what he thought he had gained. The crowd was no longer on his side. They were restless now, ashamed of their earlier silence, angry at his cruelty. And above it all, the couple sat in peace. Holding a secret that no one yet understood, the storm was building. The crowd had reacted, and soon the truth would come crashing down. The restaurant's atmosphere had shifted completely. Where laughter once echoed at the waiter's cruel jokes, now silence and tension filled the air. The guests no longer smiled at his arrogance. Instead, their faces were serious, some angry, some ashamed. The young boy's voice still hung in the air like a challenge. "You're the rude one, not them." The arrogant waiter's smirk had vanished. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his apron, trying to appear calm. But inside, his confidence was crumbling. The crowd was no longer with him, and he could feel their eyes piercing into him. Judging him, the elderly black couple sat quietly at their table, still eating with dignity. They had not raised their voices once. They had not demanded respect, yet somehow the entire room was shifting toward their side. Their silence carried more power than the waiter's insults ever could. Near the entrance, the manager finally decided it was time. He was a tall man in his 40s, wearing a sharp black suit and a polished expression. From the moment the couple had walked in, he had recognized them. He had remained silent, watching carefully because he knew something the waiter did not. He knew the weight of this night now. As the murmurs in the room grew louder and the waiter's arrogance continued to show cracks, the manager stepped forward. The sound of his polished shoes against the floor echoed as he walked slowly across the room. Each step silenced more whispers. Guests turned their heads, sensing something important was about to happen. The waiter noticed him coming and stiffened. His heart skipped. "Manager," he said quickly, forcing a laugh as if to pull him onto his side. "You saw what's happening, right? These people. They don't belong here. They're making a scene." But the manager didn't respond. He simply kept walking, his expression unreadable. The waiter panicked. He laughed again, louder this time. "I was just keeping order. You know how it is. This is a fine dining place. We can't just let anyone walk in looking like that." He gestured rudely toward the couple. Gasps rippled through the crowd again. The arrogance in his words was heavier than before, and now almost no one supported him. Heads shook, faces hardened, lips pressed tightly in disapproval. The manager stopped in front of the couple's table. His back was straight, his voice calm but commanding. "Good evening," he said respectfully. The old man and woman looked up at him. Their eyes were calm, wise, and knowing. They gave him small nods, acknowledging his presence. The waiter blinked, confused. "Wait, you're greeting them? Why?" The manager turned his head slowly, his gaze locking onto the waiter. For the first time, his voice carried steel, "because they deserve respect." The word struck the waiter like a slap. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The crowd shifted again. People leaned forward, eyes wide, waiting for what would come next. The manager looked back at the couple, his tone respectful, almost reverent. "I want to personally apologize for what you've endured this evening. This behavior is unacceptable, and it does not represent our restaurant." Gasps spread across the room. Some guests looked at each other, realizing something deeper was happening. The waiter's face turned pale. He stammered, "Apologize? To them? But they enough." The manager cut him off sharply. His voice sliced through the air, and the waiter fell silent instantly. The room went so quiet that the faint clinking of silverware from a far corner sounded loud. The manager's eyes hardened as he turned fully toward the waiter. "I warned my staff many times. Never judge a guest by their appearance. Every person who walks through those doors deserves dignity and respect. You have failed in that duty tonight." The waiter swallowed hard, sweat forming on his forehead. His arrogance was fading fast, replaced by fear. But the manager wasn't done. He took a deep breath, then looked around the restaurant, his voice firm but clear. "Let this be a lesson to everyone. True worth is not measured by clothes or money. It is measured by character." The diners listened in silence, many of them lowering their eyes, ashamed of their earlier whispers and judgments. The elderly woman finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but steady. "Thank you, but we are not angry. People reveal themselves through their actions. We simply choose patience." Her words sent a quiet shiver through the room. She had every reason to be bitter, yet she spoke with grace. The waiter's voice cracked as he tried to defend himself. I didn't know. I thought." "That's the problem," the manager said coldly. "You thought, but you did not see. You judged without knowing." The young boy, still watching intently, whispered to his mother, "See? I told you they're special." The mother nodded slowly, her eyes moist, her heart heavy with regret for staying silent earlier. The manager bowed slightly to the couple. "Please forgive what has happened tonight. And please, continue your meal in peace. No one will disturb you again." The couple nodded with quiet dignity. The old man simply said, "We will finish. And then the truth will reveal itself." The words struck everyone in the room. The truth will reveal itself. What truth? The waiter trembled, glancing nervously around the room. His arrogance was gone. Now, fear had taken its place. The guests leaned closer, whispers rising again. "Who are they?" Someone asked. "Why is the manager treating them with so much respect?" Nobody knew, but everyone wanted to find out. The waiter clenched his fists at his side, his mind racing. He had a sinking feeling that his career was about to collapse. And he was right, because the truth, still hidden, was coming. And when it did, the whole restaurant would never forget it. The restaurant felt different now. The laughter, the mocking whispers, the arrogant soul of it had been replaced by silence and unease. The manager's words still echoed through the room. True worth is not measured by clothes or money. It is measured by character. The elderly couple continued their meal slowly, gracefully, as if nothing around them mattered. They cut their food carefully, sipped water, and spoke softly to each other. Their calmness was unshaken, their dignity untouchable. But the rest of the restaurant was not calm. The guests were restless. They leaned closer to one another, whispering, wondering, who were this man and woman? Why did the manager show them such deep respect? Why had he apologized so seriously, almost reverently? At a table near the front, a man whispered to his wife, "This doesn't make sense. Why would the manager bow like that? Unless—" His voice trailed off. "Unless what?" she asked. He glanced toward the couple nervously. "Unless there's someone important." The woman's eyes widened slightly. She turned to look at the couple again. Their simple clothes no longer looked ordinary. Now they seemed almost like a disguise. At another table, a group of businessmen muttered together. "I've seen that man's face before," one of them said, frowning. "I can't place it, but I swear I've seen him somewhere on TV," one asked. "Maybe," the first man replied, "or in the papers. I just can't remember where." The young boy, still staring openly at the couple, leaned closer to his mother. "Mom," he whispered, "I think they're famous." His mother tried to hush him. "Don't say that," but the boy shook his head firmly. "No, I know it. Look at how calm they are. Look at how everyone's acting around them. They're not ordinary." The mother couldn't argue. She had the same thought, though she didn't dare speak it aloud. Back near the kitchen, the senior waiter, who had warned his colleague earlier, crossed his arms. He turned to the bartender and whispered, "I knew it. From the moment they walked in, I knew they weren't ordinary." "Look at them, dignity like that doesn't come from nowhere." The bartender nodded quietly. And the manager's face. "Did you see it? He knows them. He's just waiting for the right moment." The arrogant waiter stood nearby, pale and sweating. His earlier smirk was gone, replaced by fear. He could feel the whispers in the room. They weren't laughing with him anymore. They weren't mocking the couple. They were questioning him. His hand shook as he adjusted his apron again. "Who are they?" The thought haunted him. "Who did I insult?" The old man finally placed his fork down, wiping his mouth gently with the napkin. He looked around the room slowly, his eyes scanning the faces one by one. Wherever his gaze landed, people looked down quickly, ashamed. When his eyes met the waiter's, the younger man froze. It felt like the old man could see right through him, into his heart, into every cruel thought he had ever had. The waiter looked away quickly, his throat dry. The old woman placed her hand softly on her husband's arm and whispered something only he could hear. He nodded gently. Then he spoke, his voice calm, but clear enough for the nearest tables to hear. "Respect is not about what a person wears. Respect is about who they are inside." The words rippled through the air like a stone dropped in water. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The boy's mother lowered her head. Even the businessman who had defended the waiter earlier clenched his jaw, unable to deny the truth. The old man picked up his glass of water, took a slow sip, and set it down. His eyes remained steady, unshaken. Then quietly, but firmly, he added, "Very soon, we'll all understand who we are." The sentence landed like thunder. Gasps echoed across the restaurant. People leaned closer to their companions, whispering fiercely. What does he mean? Who are they? Why is he speaking like that? The boy nearly bounced in his seat. I told you. I told you they're important. His father hushed him quickly, but even he could not hide the nervous look on his face. The manager, standing quietly near the corner, closed his eyes for a moment. He knew the truth would not stay hidden much longer. The couple's patience had limits. The night was nearing its turning point. The arrogant waiter, however, was drowning in panic. His breaths came shallow and quick. His earlier confidence was shattered, his pride gone. The whispers cut into him like knives. What if they're rich? He thought desperately. What if they're famous? What if they own this place? The thought made his stomach twist. What if I ruined everything with my stupid jokes? He tried to approach the couple again, but his steps faltered. His voice trembled as he spoke. I was only joking earlier, he stammered. I didn't mean any harm, but the couple didn't even look at him. They continued their meal in silence, ignoring his words completely. The rejection stung worse than any insult. The whispers grew louder, spreading through the room like fire. The words important, famous, and powerful floated from table to table. And then slowly, a dangerous realization began to take root in the waiter's mind. The truth was coming, and when it came, it wouldn't just silence the room, it would destroy him. The restaurant buzzed with whispers. Forks and knives rested forgotten on plates. Even the soft piano in the background could not calm the unease filling the air. Everyone was asking the same question. Who are they? The elderly black couple sat with quiet dignity, still eating slowly, still ignoring the chaos around them. But their words lingered in every ear. Very soon, you will all understand who we are. It was a promise. A warning. A mystery too heavy to ignore. The arrogant waiter's throat was dry. His palms were sweaty as he tried to hide behind his forced smile, but inside, fear gnawed at him. The couple's calmness was scarier than anger. Their silence was louder than shouting. Back near the bar, the senior waiter leaned closer to another staff member. The manager knows something, he whispered. Look at his face. He recognized them the moment they walked in. The bartender nodded nervously, but he hasn't said anything. Why? The senior waiter's eyes narrowed. Because he's waiting. He knows the truth will come out on its own. At the far end of the restaurant, the young boy tugged on his mother's arm. Mom, he said eagerly, what if they're really, really rich? Or famous? Or the owners of this place? The boy's mother didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the manager, who stood near the couple's table, his expression calm but tense. He hadn't moved for several minutes as though he were preparing for something. Finally, the whispers grew too loud. People weren't eating anymore. They were staring, waiting, desperate for answers. The manager drew a deep breath and stepped forward. His polished shoes clicked softly against the floor. The room grew silent instantly. He stopped a few feet from the couple's table. His posture was straight, his voice steady. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his tone clear but serious, I believe it is time you all understood something important. The crowd leaned forward. Some held their breath. Even the young boy sat perfectly still. The arrogant waiter froze in place. His stomach churned. His legs felt weak. The manager continued. From the moment they walked through those doors, many of you judged this couple by what they wore, by how they looked. And many of you stayed silent when they were mocked. A heavy silence followed. Some diners lowered their eyes to their plates, ashamed. Others glanced nervously around, unable to deny the truth. The manager's eyes swept across the room. But appearances deceive. What you see on the outside is not always the truth. And tonight, this truth will humble us all. The waiter swallowed hard, his chest rising and falling quickly. What truth? What is he about to say? The elderly man placed his fork down slowly. His eyes met the manager's. He gave a small nod, as though giving silent permission. The manager bowed his head respectfully before speaking again. His voice carried weight now, almost reverence. This couple, he said firmly, are not ordinary guests. They are people who deserve the highest respect. People whose names many of you would recognize. Gasps echoed across the room. The whispers started again, faster, louder. Who are they? Names we'd recognize? Does that mean? Are they famous? The young boy's eyes shone with excitement. I knew it. He whispered loudly. I told you, Mom. His mother pressed a finger to her lips, but even she could not hide her curiosity. The waiter's legs nearly buckled. His lips trembled. He tried to speak, but no words came out. The manager turned back toward the couple, bowing slightly again. I know who you are, he said softly. I recognized you immediately, but out of respect, I waited. I knew the moment would come when everyone else would see it too. The couple exchanged a glance. The woman gave the faintest smile, graceful and calm. The old man nodded once, but still, the manager did not reveal their names. Instead, he looked back at the diners and said firmly, You will all learn soon enough. But remember this. Never judge a person until you know their story. Tonight, you have judged wrongly. The whispers grew louder. The suspense was unbearable. People shifted in their seats, leaning forward, eyes wide, hearts racing. The arrogant waiter could barely breathe. If they're important, if they're rich, if they're famous, I'm finished. Completely finished. He wanted to beg to apologize again, but fear chained his tongue. The couple remained calm. The man finally spoke, his voice low but steady. Patience. The truth comes at the right time. The whole restaurant froze again. No one moved. No one breathed. The suspense had grown into something bigger now. Not just curiosity, but fear, guilt, and awe. The whisper of truth was spreading. And soon it would roar. The restaurant felt like it was holding its breath. Forks and knives remained untouched. Drinks sat on tables, forgotten. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the elderly couple and the manager standing beside them. The air was heavy, thick with tension. The old man's calm words echoed in everyone's mind. The truth comes at the right time. The waiter who had mocked them earlier stood frozen. His face was pale, his hands trembled, and sweat rolled down his forehead. His mind raced in circles. Who are they? What truth? What have I done? He tried to force a smile, but it looked crooked, nervous, fake. He stepped back toward the kitchen, hoping to disappear into the shadows. But it was too late. People had already seen his arrogance earlier. People remembered the way he had laughed, the way he had insulted. Now the whispers weren't just about the couple. They were about him. Isn't that the waiter who laughed at them? Yes, the tall one. I saw him mock them. He's finished when the truth comes out. The words cut into him like knives. He could hear them even when they were whispered. His ears burned with shame. At the back of the restaurant, the senior waiter watched him carefully. He shook his head slowly. I warned you, he thought. I told you to be careful. And now, look. The manager glanced briefly at the trembling waiter, but he did not speak. His silence was worse than words. It felt like judgment, quiet and heavy. The arrogant waiter's chest tightened. He tried to breathe deeply, but each breath felt shallow. His mind screamed, I have to fix this. I have to apologize. Gathering courage, he walked slowly toward the couple's table. His legs felt weak, almost shaking. When he finally reached them, he bent slightly, forcing a shaky smile. Sir. Ma'am, he stammered, his voice trembling. Please forgive me. I didn't know who you were. I spoke out of line. I didn't mean it. The elderly man lifted his eyes slowly, calm and steady. His gaze met the waiter's. There was no anger, no shouting. Just silence that felt heavier than thunder. The old woman glanced at her husband, then back at the waiter. Her voice was gentle but sharp, like a blade hidden in silk. You only apologize because you are afraid of who we might be, she said softly. Not because you respect us. The waiter froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her words struck him harder than any punishment. The diners gasped quietly. Heads turned. People nodded slowly. They knew she spoke the truth. The waiter's fake smile vanished. His knees felt weak again. He stepped back, defeated, shame burning his face. The couple returned to their meal, calm and composed as if nothing had happened. But the silence in the room deepened. The waiter's fear now hung over everyone like a shadow. The young boy leaned closer to his mother. "Mom, he's scared because he knows they're powerful." His mother hushed him again, but even she couldn't deny it. She could see the fear written all over the waiter's face. The manager finally stepped forward again, his voice steady. "This is why we should never mock strangers. We never know who sits before us." The crowd listened silently. No one dared to argue. The trembling waiter retreated toward the corner, his heart racing. He felt exposed, judged, and humiliated. The whispers only made it worse. What if they're billionaires? What if they own this restaurant? What if they're famous leaders? His imagination ran wild. Every possibility was worse than the last. He remembered the old man's words. "Very soon, we'll all understand who we are." The thought made him sick. He pictured the truth being revealed. The shame of the entire restaurant seeing his cruelty, the headlines in newspapers, maybe even on TV. He closed his eyes, gripping the edge of the wall to steady himself. "Please," he begged silently, "please let this not be the end of me." But deep down, he knew the truth was already coming. The old man placed his fork down again. He wiped his mouth carefully, then leaned back in his chair. He looked around the restaurant, his eyes meeting face after face. No one dared to look away this time. His calm gaze held them all captive. The old man's voice was soft, but every corner of the room heard it clearly. "Respect is not a gift. It is a choice. And tonight, many of you chose wrongly." The words struck deep. Heads lowered. Some guests swallowed hard. Even the arrogant waiter felt as though the ground beneath him was vanishing. The old man's eyes lingered on him for a moment. Not with hate. Not even with anger. But with something worse, disappointment. The waiter's chest ached. He wished the man would scream, would yell, would throw him out. Anything would be better than this quiet, piercing disappointment. The silence stretched long. Too long. And then the old woman spoke again, her voice calm but final. "The night is not over. The truth will soon speak louder than words." The entire restaurant froze. Hearts pounded. Everyone waited. The waiter's fear grew into terror. His hands shook violently now. Sweat drenched his forehead. His lips whispered soundless words. "Please, please, please." The truth was coming, and when it arrived, it would change everything. The restaurant was no longer a place for food and laughter. It had become a theater of silence, where every breath felt heavy. Every glance carried weight. The elderly couple sat quietly, their dignity unshaken. The old man's words still echoed through the air. "Respect is not a gift. It is a choice. And tonight, many of you chose wrongly." The waiter stood trembling in the corner, his fear almost visible. He wished he could vanish, wished he had never laughed, never mocked. But the night was far from over. The diners leaned closer to one another, whispering nervously, "Who are they? Why does the manager respect them so much? What truth is coming?" The young boy's voice broke through the hush. "Mom, I think he's somebody important. Maybe a leader?" The boy's mother placed her hand on his shoulder. She, not so loud, she whispered, but her own heart raced. She, too, felt the same. At the bar, the senior waiter leaned against the counter, eyes fixed on the couple. "It's coming," he muttered softly. "The truth is coming." The bartender frowned. "How can you be so sure?" The senior waiter didn't look away. "Because people like that don't walk quietly into a room unless their silence is meant." She said to shake it. The manager finally stepped forward again. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, carrying a knowledge no one else had. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said firmly, "tonight is not just another evening. Tonight, you are in the presence of people who carry history with them. People who have walked through storms and yet still stand with dignity." Gasps swept across the restaurant. The arrogant waiter's knees buckled. He gripped a chair to stop himself from collapsing. "History. What does he mean?" The manager's voice grew stronger. You judged them by their clothes, by their age, by what you thought you saw. But you did not see their truth. You did not see their story. The old man finally raised his hand gently, signaling the manager to stop. The room grew even quieter. With slow, steady movements, the old man reached into the inside pocket of his worn coat. Every eye followed his hand. The air felt like it might break. The arrogant waiter nearly fainted. What is he pulling out? A card? A badge? The old man placed a folded piece of paper on the table. His wife's hand rested softly over his, steadying him. He unfolded it carefully, then held it up just enough for the nearest diners to see. It wasn't just any paper, it was an old photograph. The photograph showed a younger version of the couple, standing in front of a large building. Behind them was a crowd of people holding signs, cheering. The diners leaned forward, their eyes wide. A murmur spread like fire. Wait, I've seen that picture before. Yes, it looks familiar. Isn't that from? The newspapers. The young boy's father squinted, then his eyes widened. Oh my God, I know who they are. The old man set the photo down gently. His voice was calm, but carried deep weight. Years ago, we stood for something greater than ourselves. We fought for rights that were denied to us. We gave our lives, our time, our hearts, so that others could walk free. Gasps filled the room again. Some covered their mouths in shock. Others leaned back in disbelief. The waiter's heart dropped into his stomach. His mind spun in panic. Activists. Leaders. Heroes. The old woman spoke softly, but her words struck deep. We were judged then too. Judged by color, by clothes, by where we came from. But we never bowed. We never stopped. The silence that followed was different now. It wasn't just suspense. It was respect hesitant, growing, unavoidable. The manager bowed his head. I knew it, he said quietly. The moment I saw you, I remembered the photograph. I remembered the story. The arrogant waiter's face turned ghostly pale. His legs shook. I mocked them. I mocked people who changed lives. The old man looked around the restaurant slowly, his gaze powerful, commanding. Do you see now? He asked softly. Do you understand why respect matters? Not because of titles, not because of fame, but because every human carries a story you do not see. The diners lowered their heads, ashamed. Some even whispered apologies under their breath. The young boy, however, whispered to his mother with awe. They're heroes. His mother wiped her eyes quickly. Yes, she whispered back. They are. The waiter wanted to sink into the floor. His chest ached with regret, his throat dry with fear. The photo, the words. The truth, it was all too much. The old man folded the photograph again and placed it carefully back into his pocket. His voice softened. The truth is only beginning to speak. There is more you will come to know. And with that, silence returned. But this silence was heavier than before, thick with respect, guilt, and unanswered questions. The truth had begun to reveal itself, and it was only the beginning. The photograph had spoken louder than any words. The old man's quiet voice, the woman's calm tone, and the image of their younger selves standing in front of a cheering crowd. It all burned into the minds of everyone in the restaurant. The air was heavy. But it wasn't just silence now. It was shock. A deep, restless shock that made every heartbeat sound louder than the piano in the background. People who had stared out earlier now lowered their eyes. People who had whispered insults now whispered apologies. The weight of shame pressed down on the room. The young boy stared wide-eyed at the couple. His hands gripped the edge of the table. Mom, he whispered loudly, they're not just ordinary. They're heroes. His mother pressed her hand against his, her own voice trembling. Yes, sweetheart, they are. At another table, a businessman leaned back, his face pale. He had been one of the first to laugh when the waiter mocked the couple. Now his throat tightened. He whispered to his colleague, I remember reading about them years ago. They marched. They spoke. They stood up when others stayed silent. His colleague nodded slowly, guilt written across his face, and we laughed at them tonight. Across the room, senior waiter shook his head, his voice low but firm as he muttered to another staff member. Do you see? This is why you never mock guests. Respect first. Always respect. The bartender's hands shook as he polished a glass. That young waiter. He's finished. Everyone's eyes eventually shifted toward him, the arrogant waiter. He stood stiff in the corner, his face drenched in sweat, his chest rising and falling too quickly. His eyes darted around like a trapped animal. He felt every stare, every whisper. The truth was suffocating him. Heroes, activists, leaders, and I mocked them. I called them cheap. His legs wobbled. He grabbed the wall for support. His lips trembled as he tried to speak, but no sound came. The shame was unbearable. The old man noticed his fear but said nothing. His silence was worse than anger. His calm, steady gaze cut deeper than any scolding could. The old woman finally looked up at him. Her voice was gentle but heavy. Do you understand now? Words can wound deeper than you imagine. The waiter's lips quivered. I'm sorry, he whispered, barely able to breathe. But no one in the restaurant looked at him with pity. They all saw him for what he had done. His apology felt small, too late, too weak. The young boy's father leaned closer to his wife. Whispering, he laughed at them like they were nothing. And now, look, he's the one who looks small. His wife nodded silently, eyes filled with both awe and shame. The manager finally stepped forward again. His voice was calm but strong. Everyone in this room must understand something. These two are not simply guests. They carry history within them. Their lives tell a story of strength, sacrifice, and dignity. He turned slightly, his eyes locking on the waiter. And yet we failed them tonight. We failed to show respect. The waiter's knees buckled. He almost collapsed, grabbing the edge of a chair. His breath came fast, shallow, desperate. The diners watched in silence. Some shook their heads, others whispered prayers. The shock of the truth was spreading, changing the room. Pulling everyone into its weight, the old man finally raised his voice again, still calm, still steady. Respect is not given because of titles. It is not given because of wealth. It is given because every person deserves dignity. But when respect is withheld, it reveals more about the one who withholds it than the one denied it. The words settled into the air like thunder rolling across the sky. A woman at the back wiped tears from her eyes. A man near the front clenched his fists, ashamed of his earlier laughter. The boy whispered to himself, I'll never forget this. The waiter, however, broke completely. His chest heaved, his vision blurred. He whispered frantically, Please forgive me, please. I didn't know. The old woman looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were kind but unflinching. You did not know who we were. But you should have known we were human. The words crushed him. His legs gave way, and he sank onto a chair, trembling, broken. The restaurant was silent again. But this silence was filled with something deeper than before. It was filled with respect for the couple, filled with shame for the laughter, filled with the heavy weight of truth. The photograph still rested on the table. A symbol, a reminder, a mirror for everyone in the room. And though the shock had spread, the night was not finished. The truth had only begun to open its doors. The restaurant felt heavy, as if the walls themselves carried the weight of what had just been revealed. The photograph lay folded on the table, but its image burned in everyone's memory. The couple sat with calm dignity. The old man's face was steady, his wife's expression soft but strong. They did not raise their voices. They did not boast. They simply existed, then their presence demanded respect. The young waiter, the one who had mocked them, sat slumped in a chair near the corner. His body shook. His hands covered his face. His pride had shattered into pieces. The old woman's words still echoed in his ears. You did not know who we were, but you should have known we were human. Those words struck not only him, but everyone in the room. Diners sat quietly, ashamed. Some avoided looking at the couple, afraid of meeting their eyes. Others stared openly, almost in awe. The young boy whispered to his mother, "Why does it feel like the whole room changed?" His mother placed her arm around him. "Because truth changes everything, son. It makes us see what we refused to see before." At another table, the businessman who had laughed earlier rubbed his forehead. "I mocked them," he said to his colleague. His voice was low, filled with regret. "I mocked people who carried history." His colleague sighed deeply. "We all judged too quickly, and now we're ashamed." The senior waiter stood quietly near the bar. He glanced at the broken young waiter, then back at the couple. His voice was soft but firm. "They taught him a lesson he will never forget. And maybe they taught us all." The bartender nodded silently. Even he, who had not spoken much, felt the weight pressing down on his chest. The manager stepped forward once again. His voice was steady, carrying both respect and responsibility. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "tonight we have all witnessed something important. We came here expecting a meal, laughter, and comfort. Instead, we were given a mirror that shows who we are when faced with difference." His words filled the room. Diners listened intently. "We saw arrogance," the manager continued. "We saw mockery. We saw silence in the face of cruelty. But we also saw dignity. We saw patience. And now we see the truth." The old man nodded slowly, acknowledging the manager's words. His voice was calm when he spoke. "Respect is the weight every heart must carry," he said. "Some hearts are light because they give respect freely. Some hearts are heavy because they refuse to give it. Tonight you must decide which heart you will have." The words hung in the air like sacred vows. The young boy whispered, "That's powerful." His eyes were wide, shining with admiration. His mother wiped away a small tear. "Yes," she whispered back. "Very powerful." The young waiter lifted his head slowly. His face was pale, his eyes red from holding back tears. His voice cracked as he spoke. I was wrong," he admitted softly. "Not just because I didn't know who you were. I was wrong because I didn't respect you as people. I judged you. I laughed at you. And now I can't take it back." His words trembled in the silence. The diners watched closely. Some shook their heads, others sighed. The old woman looked at him, her eyes steady. "Acknowledging the truth is the first step," she said. "But respect is not just spoken. It is lived. From this night forward, your choices will show who you are." The waiter swallowed hard. Her words cut deep, but they also lit a spark of hope inside him. Maybe he still had a chance to change. The old man leaned forward slightly. "We are not here to destroy you," he said gently. "We are here to remind you and everyone that dignity belongs to." The weight of his words settled across the restaurant like a blanket. It was not harsh. It was not cruel. It was heavy with truth, but also with a strange, unexpected kindness. The diners shifted in their seats. Some nodded quietly. Some wiped tears. The businessman who had laughed earlier stood slowly. His voice shook as he spoke. "I mocked you tonight," he admitted, "and I am ashamed. You deserve better. Much better." The old man gave him a single nod, calm and forgiving. "Change begins with honesty," he said. The man sat down, his face pale, but his heart lighter. The manager stepped closer to the couple. His voice was full of respect. "Would you allow me," he asked, "to share your names with everyone here? They deserve to know the truth." The old man exchanged a glance with his wife. She gave a small nod. "Not yet," the man replied calmly. "They must first understand respect without knowing our titles. If they respect only because of our names, then nothing has truly changed." The manager bowed his head. "Yes, sir." The diners looked at one another. Some frowned with impatience, wanting answers. Others nodded slowly, understanding the wisdom. The young boy whispered eagerly, "They're teaching everyone a lesson." His mother smiled faintly. "And it's one we will never forget." The young waiter bowed his head again, his voice breaking. "Please, I will learn. I promise I will learn." The old woman gave him one last steady look. "Then let your actions speak louder than your words." The restaurant remained silent. No more laughter. No more mocking. Just the heavy weight of respect settling on every heart. The truth had begun to change them, but the full truth, the one that would shatter the silence completely, was still waiting in the shadows. Of the night, the restaurant was no longer the same place it had been an hour ago. When the elderly couple first walked in, laughter filled the air. Glasses clinked and voices carried without care. Now, silence ruled the room. Every sound, even the soft clatter of a spoon against a plate, felt sharp and heavy. The couple sat quietly at their table. They had not ordered food. They had not even touched the water set before them. And yet their presence filled every corner of the restaurant. It was as if the entire building leaned toward them, waiting for what would come next. The young waiter who had mocked them earlier stood frozen near the wall. His hands fidgeted nervously with the edge of his apron. His face was pale, his lips trembling. He had already apologized, but the guilt inside him grew stronger with each passing second. The diners too felt restless. They shifted in their seats, whispering in low tones. Their eyes darted between one another, then back to the couple. Some looked ashamed, some looked curious, and some, those who still did not fully understand, looked frustrated. One woman leaned close to her husband and whispered, "Why don't they just tell us who they are? If they're so important, why keep it a secret?" Her husband shook his head slowly. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe they want us to respect them as people first, not as names." At the corner table, the little boy who had been watching everything sat upright, his small hands gripping the edge of the table. His wide eyes were fixed on the couple. He did not fidget like other children. He did not whine for food. He simply watched, as if his young heart understood the importance of the moment. His mother noticed and whispered, "Are you tired, son?" The boy shook his head firmly. "No, Mama, I don't want to miss this." The mother's eyes softened. She looked at the couple and then at her son. Even a child sees the truth tonight, she thought. How many adults missed it before? The senior waiter moved closer to the young waiter, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Breathe," he whispered. "This is not the end for you. This is the beginning if you choose it." The young waiter's throat tightened. He whispered back, "I feel like everyone hates me now." The senior waiter shook his head. "No, everyone is watching you. There is a difference. What you do next will matter more than what you did before." The manager stood near the center of the room, his back straight, his hands clasped in front of him. He had seen many evenings in this restaurant, some filled with joy, some with anger, but never one like this. He kept glancing at the couple, wondering what their next move would be. The old man finally broke the silence. His voice was calm, yet it carried across the room with ease. "Tell me," he said, looking directly at the young waiter. "When you saw us walk through that door, what did you think?" The waiter's heart pounded. Every eye turned toward him. He swallowed hard, his voice shaking. I thought you didn't belong here. I thought you were too poor to sit in this place." The old man nodded slowly. "And why did you think that?" The waiter's lips quivered. Because of the way you dressed. Your clothes looked old, and I thought you couldn't afford it." The old man leaned back in his chair. His voice remained steady. "So, you measured us by cloth, by fabric and thread. Is that the value of a human being?" The room grew colder. The question sliced through every person present. Some lowered their eyes, unable to meet the couple's gaze. The young waiter's shoulders slumped. "No, sir," he whispered. "That's not the value of a human being. I was wrong." The old woman spoke then, her voice soft but firm. "Clothes can lie. Money can lie. Even smiles can lie. But the truth of a person, that never lies. You judged us by what you saw, not by who we were. And now you carry the weight of that mistake." The boy at the corner whispered, "She's right." The mother nodded. "Yes, she's right." The old man's eyes swept across the entire room, not just the waiter. "And what about the rest of you? When we walked in, did you not stare? Did you not whisper? Did you not laugh in silence, even if you said nothing aloud?" The diners shifted uncomfortably. A few nodded shamefully. Others remained quiet, unwilling to admit their guilt. The businessman, who had earlier confessed his mockery, stood again. "I laughed," he admitted loudly, his voice shaking. "I laughed because I thought you were out of place. But it's me who is out of place. Out of place in my thinking, out of place in my pride." The old man nodded once, calm and steady. Truth spoken aloud is the first step toward change. The silence deepened. The restaurant felt like a courtroom. A couple sitting not as guests, but as judges of the human soul. Then, suddenly, the front door of the restaurant creaked open. A cold breeze swept inside. Heads turned. Everyone's breath caught. 2 men entered. They wore sharp suits, their expressions serious. Their eyes searched the room until they landed on the couple. Gasps filled the air. Whispers spread quickly. Who are they? Why are they here for them? The young waiter's knees nearly buckled. His mind spun with fear. Were these men guards? Assistants? Officials? The old woman smiled faintly when she saw them. The old man gave them a simple nod, as if greeting familiar faces. The entire restaurant leaned forward, hearts pounding. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. The storm was about to break. The restaurant grew colder. As the 2 suited men stepped inside, their polished shoes tapped against the marble floor, each sound echoing in the heavy silence. Their dark coats carried the night air with them, and their eyes scanned the room carefully. Every diner stiffened. Some leaned back in their chairs, others bent forward with curiosity. The young boy gripped his mother's hand, whispering, "Who are they, Mama? Why are they looking at the couple like that?" His mother whispered back, "I don't know, son. But I think we're about to find out." The manager hurried forward, bowing slightly out of instinct. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice low and nervous, "how may I help you?" The taller of the 2 men didn't answer the manager. His gaze was locked on the elderly couple. The shorter man followed behind. Carrying a small black case in one hand, the old man at the table lifted his head slowly, his calm eyes meeting theirs. He gave a faint nod, as though he had been expecting them. The old woman's lips curved into the smallest smile. The taller man finally spoke, his voice deep and respectful. "Sir, ma'am, forgive us for arriving late." The car was delayed outside. A wave of murmurs swept through the diners. "Sir, ma'am." Why did these men speak to the couple with such respect? The young waiter's heart thudded painfully in his chest. His mouth went dry. He couldn't understand what was happening, but he felt his world sliding out of his control. The words hung in the air like sacred vows. The young boy whispered, "That's powerful." His eyes were wide, shining with admiration. His mother wiped away a small tear. "Yes," she whispered back. "Very powerful." The young waiter lifted his head slowly. His face was pale, his eyes red from holding back tears. His voice cracked as he spoke. I was wrong," he admitted softly. "Not just because I didn't know who you were. I was wrong because I didn't respect you as people. I judged you. I laughed at you. And now I can't take it back." His words trembled in the silence. The diners watched closely. Some shook their heads, others sighed. The old woman looked at him, her eyes steady. "Acknowledging the truth is the first step," she said. "But respect is not just spoken. It is lived. From this night forward, your choices will show who you are." The waiter swallowed hard. Her words cut deep, but they also lit a spark of hope inside him. Maybe he still had a chance to change. The old man leaned forward slightly. "We are not here to destroy you," he said gently. "We are here to remind you and everyone that dignity belongs to." The weight of his words settled across the restaurant like a blanket. It was not harsh. It was not cruel. It was heavy with truth, but also with a strange, unexpected kindness. The diners shifted in their seats. Some nodded quietly. Some wiped tears. The businessman who had laughed earlier stood slowly. His voice shook as he spoke. "I mocked you tonight," he admitted, "and I am ashamed. You deserve better. Much better. The old man gave him a single nod, calm and forgiving. "Change begins with honesty," he said. The man sat down, his face pale, but his heart lighter. The manager stepped closer to the couple. His voice was full of respect. "Would you allow me," he asked, "to share your names with everyone here? They deserve to know the truth." The old man exchanged a glance with his wife. She gave a small nod. "Not yet," the man replied calmly. "They must first understand respect without knowing our titles. If they respect only because of our names, then nothing has truly changed." The manager bowed his head. "Yes, sir." The diners looked at one another. Some frowned with impatience, wanting answers. Others nodded slowly, understanding the wisdom. The young boy whispered eagerly, "They're teaching everyone a lesson." His mother smiled faintly, "And it's one we will never forget." The young waiter bowed his head again, his voice breaking. "Please, I will learn. I promise I will learn." The old woman gave him one last steady look. "Then let your actions speak louder than your words." The restaurant remained silent. No more laughter. No more mocking. Just the heavy weight of respect settling on every heart. The truth had begun to change them, but the full truth, the one that would shatter the silence completely, was still waiting in the shadows. Of the night, the restaurant was no longer the same place it had been an hour ago. When the elderly couple first walked in, laughter filled the air. Glasses clinked and voices carried without care. Now, silence ruled the room. Every sound, even the soft clatter of a spoon against a plate, felt sharp and heavy. The couple sat quietly at their table. They had not ordered food. They had not even touched the water set before them. And yet their presence filled every corner of the restaurant. It was as if the entire building leaned toward them, waiting for what would come next. The young waiter who had mocked them earlier stood frozen near the wall. His hands fidgeted nervously with the edge of his apron. His face was pale, his lips trembling. He had already apologized, but the guilt inside him grew stronger with each passing second. The diners too felt restless. They shifted in their seats, whispering in low tones. Their eyes darted between one another, then back to the couple. Some looked ashamed, some looked curious, and some, those who still did not fully understand, looked frustrated. One woman leaned close to her husband and whispered, "Why don't they just tell us who they are? If they're so important, why keep it a secret?" Her husband shook his head slowly. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe they want us to respect them as people first, not as names." At the corner table, the little boy who had been watching everything sat upright, his small hands gripping the edge of the table. His wide eyes were fixed on the couple. He did not fidget like other children. He did not whine for food. He simply watched, as if his young heart understood the importance of the moment. His mother noticed and whispered, "Are you tired, son?" The boy shook his head firmly. "No, Mama, I don't want to miss this." The mother's eyes softened. She looked at the couple and then at her son. Even a child sees the truth tonight, she thought. How many adults missed it before? The senior waiter moved closer to the young waiter, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Breathe," he whispered. "This is not the end for you. This is the beginning if you choose it." The young waiter's throat tightened. He whispered back, "I feel like everyone hates me now." The senior waiter shook his head. "No, everyone is watching you. There is a difference. What you do next will matter more than what you did before." The manager stood near the center of the room, his back straight, his hands clasped in front of him. He had seen many evenings in this restaurant, some filled with joy, some with anger, but never one like this. He kept glancing at the couple, wondering what their next move would be. The old man finally broke the silence. His voice was calm, yet it carried across the room with ease. "Tell me," he said, looking directly at the young waiter. "When you saw us walk through that door, what did you think?" The waiter's heart pounded. Every eye turned toward him. He swallowed hard, his voice shaking. I thought you didn't belong here. I thought you were too poor to sit in this place." The old man nodded slowly. "And why did you think that?" The waiter's lips quivered. Because Because of the way you dressed. Your clothes looked old, and I thought you couldn't afford it." The old man leaned back in his chair. His voice remained steady. "So, you measured us by cloth, by fabric and thread. Is that the value of a human being?" The room grew colder. The question sliced through every person present. Some lowered their eyes, unable to meet the couple's gaze. The young waiter's shoulders slumped. "No, sir," he whispered. "That's not the value of a human being. I was wrong." The old woman spoke then, her voice soft but firm. "Clothes can lie. Money can lie. Even smiles can lie. But the truth of a person, that never lies. You judged us by what you saw, not by who we were. And now you carry the weight of that mistake." The boy at the corner whispered, "She's right." The mother nodded. "Yes, she's right." The old man's eyes swept across the entire room, not just the waiter. "And what about the rest of you? When we walked in, did you not stare? Did you not whisper? Did you not laugh in silence, even if you said nothing aloud?" The diners shifted uncomfortably. A few nodded shamefully. Others remained quiet, unwilling to admit their guilt. The businessman, who had earlier confessed his mockery, stood again. "I laughed," he admitted loudly, his voice shaking. "I laughed because I thought you were out of place. But it's me who is out of place. Out of place in my thinking, out of place in my pride." The old man nodded once, calm and steady. Truth spoken aloud is the first step toward change. The silence deepened. The restaurant felt like a courtroom. A couple sitting not as guests, but as judges of the human soul. Then, suddenly, the front door of the restaurant creaked open. A cold breeze swept inside. Heads turned. Everyone's breath caught. 2 men entered. They wore sharp suits, their expressions serious. Their eyes searched the room until they landed on the couple. Gasps filled the air. Whispers spread quickly. "Who are they? Why are they here for them?" The young waiter's knees nearly buckled. His mind spun with fear. Were these men guards? Assistants? Officials? The old woman smiled faintly when she saw them. The old man gave them a simple nod, as if greeting familiar faces. The entire restaurant leaned forward, hearts pounding. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. The storm was about to break. The restaurant grew colder. As the 2 suited men stepped inside, their polished shoes tapped against the marble floor, each sound echoing in the heavy silence. Their dark coats carried the night air with them, and their eyes scanned the room carefully. Every diner stiffened. Some leaned back in their chairs, others bent forward with curiosity. The young boy gripped his mother's hand, whispering, "Who are they, Mama? Why are they looking at the couple like that?" His mother whispered back, "I don't know, son. But I think we're about to find out." The manager hurried forward, bowing slightly out of instinct. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice low and nervous, "how may I help you?" The taller of the 2 men didn't answer the manager. His gaze was locked on the elderly couple. The shorter man followed behind. Carrying a small black case in one hand, the old man at the table lifted his head slowly, his calm eyes meeting theirs. He gave a faint nod, as though he had been expecting them. The old woman's lips curved into the smallest smile. The taller man finally spoke, his voice deep and respectful. "Sir, ma'am, forgive us for arriving late." The car was delayed outside. A wave of murmurs swept through the diners. "Sir, ma'am." Why did these men speak to the couple with such respect? The young waiter's heart thudded painfully in his chest. His mouth went dry. He couldn't understand what was happening, but he felt his world sliding out of his control.